So the topic for today is the effect of sexual abuse on children and the family. It's April 6, 2020. And doing my research for this, it's a rather somber subject, so there aren't any games associated with this. It's mainly about information, with us all being either parents or child caregivers, teachers, future parents, future child caregivers. It's important that we have this information going forward because we never know who might be able to help out. So let's start with a basic definition. Child sexual abuse. This is from the World Health Organization. I won't go into it completely, but child sexual abuse is the involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared and cannot give consent. That's pretty clear cut without having to go into the complete length of it. The statistics on this from the World Health Organization are that 1 in 5 women report having been sexually abused as a child. That's 20% of women, and 1 in 13 men, and that's 7.7% of men. As far as the U.S. is concerned, the statistics are a little better. It's 1 in 7 girls experience sexual abuse before 18. That's 14.3% of girls, and 1 in 25 boys. That's about 4%. If you look at it in other countries, which I decided to do, I guess you could consider them third world countries. We're talking about Somalia, Pakistan, and India in this situation. So Somalia's got a child sex abuse rate of about 30%. Pakistan comes in an article I read where they say there's 1 in 7 children per day that are sexually abused. And in India, 18% of children between the 8th and 9th grades have experienced sexual abuse, with 30% of adult men and 40% of adult women saying they've had sexual contact in their childhood. So why I chose these 3 specific countries is because I looked up those countries that have very low child labor regulations. Somalia comes in at 10th in the world, Pakistan at 9th, and India at 5th. So child labor laws here, you can't work before you're 15. Children work far younger in these countries for longer hours in very unsafe environments. So there can be a correlation between low child labor and child sexual abuse. If you're not caring enough to protect your children from working like slaves, you're not going to protect them from sexual abuse at your hands or the hands of someone else. It's an inference that can be made. So we're going to move on to warning signs. I've got it broken up into physical signs for children and physical signs for teenagers. In children, you're going to see pain or discoloration in the genitals, discharge around the anus or the mouth, persistent reoccurring pain during urination or bowel movements. If you're dealing with a really small child, you might be dealing with calluses or roughened skin between the buttocks where excessive rubbing may have taken place. The signs in teenagers are a little more overt than that. There may be pregnancy, there may be sexually transmitted diseases or actual bruises that you will see appear on the teenager. More general warning signs that would apply to children and teenagers are things like anxiety. Anxiety can cause nightmares, sleep disturbances, not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. Depression, the sense of feeling dirty, overeating, not eating at all, fear and apprehension when they're around certain people, not wanting to go around certain people, or they have a strong personality change when they're in someone's presence. They may want to talk about, they may leave clues about wanting to discuss sexual issues without coming right out and saying it, or they'll have mood swings where they're extremely sad or they begin to rage for no apparent reason. So let's say you found out that your child has been sexually abused. We don't even have to be specific about whether or not it's from someone within the family or without the family. Then what? Because it's happened to the child. Essentially, it's happened to the entire family and needs to be dealt with in that way. The wrong way to do it is to blame the child. Child, teenager, however you want to put it, whatever age it is, you don't want to start blaming them. You don't want to show an excess of disbelief or denial, especially if you're dealing with someone who is within the family. You don't want to take sides because it's just going to make things worse. They're already been put into a sense of there's no safety. And if you are coming at them with disbelief, trying to push them to not acknowledge what happened to them, trying to push them to just be quiet and move on with this in the past, that's not going to help healing for anyone. It's not going to help them feel safe anymore at home either. Um, it's a highly emotional thing. So the response is going to be emotional. And you have to understand that as family members, you're going to be going through an emotional response as well. So take into account you might be feeling guilt, shame, you might be feeling helplessness because you failed to protect your child and now they're having to go through this. But you need to make it understand that you're going through it together. And if you can get the proper help and have the proper acknowledgement, then you can get through it together. The most productive way to respond to this situation is you want to promote healing. You want to promote a sense of normalcy. So the same rules and structure that were there prior to the abuse need to still be there. It's something to fall back on. It's a constant, like a homeostasis. It allows them to feel safe. You need to create a safe place and to be able to express their feelings, because if they're having anxiety or they're having extreme emotions, their mood may swing from sadness to anger, and you're going to have to deal with that and find the most productive ways to cope with those excessive emotions. Of course, listen, support, help them to realize that they're resilient and they can come back from this. They're not broken. They're not damaged. Long-term effects of sexual abuse. These effects are very physical. Poor gastrointestinal health. A research study said that 1.7 times more people who were abused experience IBS in their adult lives. They have poor gynecological health, more issues with pelvic pain if they're females. Poor pain tolerance. They have generalized pain conditions like fibromyalgia or generalized joint pain. Uh, Behavior-wise, they may participate in risky behaviors like alcohol abuse, drug abuse, or hypersexuality, which we'll get into more in a second. It also can cause more psychological problems like depression or post-traumatic stress, anxiety, or bipolar or borderline personality disorders. I put on here that there's inconsistency because a lot of the research into the physical effects that people experience once they're older after having been sexually abused, the research is not consistent. In my search for, a lot of the studies were older, and the studies that they referenced were older, 1999 and early 2000s. There's not a whole lot of up-to-date research done, no longitudinal research that I could find to show the long-term effects that child sex abuse will have on you once you're an adult. There is some, but there needs to be more work done. More work done so we can actually help these people who are experiencing this. And it's not stopping. People are still growing up having been sexually abused. So this is a place where a lot more research can be done. Here is a video about hypersexuality. I found out a long time ago that hypersexuality can result after being sexually abused as a child. And I was very interested in why, because you would think that normally a lack of sexuality, wanting to pull back from sexual experiences, would be the normal course of action for someone who has experienced sexual child abuse. But in this video, she briefly explains that the hypersexuality is a means for that individual to regain control of themselves. They are choosing to have sex. They are choosing to have a lot of sex with who they want to have it with. They are in control. No one is forcing them to do something they don't want to do. It's their bodies, and they are doing with it what they want to, not what someone else is doing to them. So hypersexuality can develop as a means of regaining control of oneself and one's body. The next video talks about memory loss and reactions during assault. Oftentimes, if you want to go back and revisit the family's role and how they respond to the child, especially if you're dealing with someone that's a teenager. They may ask, why didn't you fight? Why didn't you say no? Why didn't you scream? And this video goes into talking about the body's response when you're being assaulted. I can't get into all the specifics because it does get very specific, but the hormones and things that are produced when you are assaulted can shut down the most rational and logical part of your brain in the frontal lobe, and you fall back on routines. You fall back on very primitive things that you would do if you were attacked. So you may go limp and just have everything happen to you as a means of survival, where we think intuitively, oh, if it was me, I would just start fighting back immediately. And some may, but your brain can make your body do things that you wouldn't normally do. And so this video gets into doing that. Us talks about memory loss and how with the extreme stress of the situation, the memories are not going to always flow in chronological order. They might come to you in pieces, in broken pieces. So if they're being questioned or interrogated by police, oh, what happened? Can you tell me the order it happened? Can you tell me the order backwards? If it's an already traumatizing situation and have to be interrogated by the police after you were sexually assaulted, it's not going to always come the way they think it should. So, why do survivors of child sexual abuse suffer with greater psychological and physiological consequences? And that's because of the effect that stress can have on the brain. You have a fight or flight response that your body goes into when you need to respond to a dangerous situation. If you are a victim of child sexual abuse, especially if it's repeatedly happening, you're going to be in a constant state of fear, a constant state of stress, and that stress can rewire your neural pathways so that you're always there. The cortisol, those stress hormones are always being produced, and those in your body for a long period of time are not healthy. They produce effects like diabetes when you're older, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease, because all of that is caused by inflammation, and inflammation can occur because of that extreme amount of stress hormones in your body all the time, reprogramming your neural pathways. And if you are a child and those neurological networks are still developing, it's even more detrimental. So prevention, what can we do? So early on, as was referenced in one of the chapters from the Human Growth and Development textbook, you want to build a warm parent-child connection. You want to build trust with your child. Your child should feel they should be able to come to you and tell you anything, and it's not going to be judged, or they're not going to be deemed to be lying, because they very well may not be. That rapport has to already be there from very early on. Of course, you have to teach them about their bodies, not very little cutesy names, the PP and the hoo-ha. You need to teach them correct terminology so they know how to refer to things. They need to know what things look like and what should not be touched. If you're not comfortable, you could say things like people shouldn't touch where your underwear covers or where your bathing suit covers. But they need to have this information so they know exactly what you're referring to. Let them know that no one should be seeing there or touching there unless it's a doctor with the parents present, or the parent if they're trying to help them with the difficulty there. Diaper rash, yeast infection, things of that sort. I added here, do not make children feel that they're at the mercy of every adult they come across. Every adult is not an authority figure. This is not the 1940s. You don't have to obey everyone out there, because not everyone out there has your best interest at heart. If you're teaching your child, to be respectful, don't talk back, do whatever an adult says, that's going to put them in a dangerous situation. So you need to teach them how to discern between respect shown to the proper individuals and when not to. You have to teach them to be able to say no. No, I don't like that. I don't want you touching me there. They have to have some sense of control over themselves, over their bodies. There is a game that you can play with your child. They call it a game called What If? And you can start from an early age where you're asking them, what if someone tries to touch you? What do you do? and it's something you can play with them or go over with them progressively over the years as they get older and more cognitively capable. You can ask them more complex questions to see how they will answer and go over their proper response for the sake of their safety. Um, the key to all this is communication. You have to communicate with your child. And on top of communicating, you have to strongly vet who you leave your child with. Unfortunately, not everyone is safe. Not all family members are safe. So you have to be present and aware of your child, where they are, who you leave them with. You have to be present and aware in their behavior, what's normal for them, what's not normal for them, and communicate. Keep the lines of communication open with your child. So if something happens, they will feel comfortable enough to be able to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, this happened. I said no, I didn't like it, etc., etc. Um, it's very important for us to have these skills as adults with children, as adults dealing with children and teenagers in caregiving environments and sending them off to school. We have to be able to trust that when we send our kid to school, hopefully they'll have the tools to be able to protect themselves the best that they can. Um, the rest are just my references, and I will send you the PowerPoint and the links to my YouTube videos that I placed here. And thank you so much.